Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Captain James Bollinger and you're watching the Sussex Smuggler. This evening on Halloween I have got three local Sussex ghost stories for you from three authors selected from three books, funnily enough. So please enjoy them, grab a drink, put a candle on, turn the lights down and relax. Hello, and we're staying in East Sussex and going over to the wonderful historical town of Hastings, where you'll find such excellent museums, fish and chips, beer, pubs, and many festivals. But this particular ghost story takes us to the old town of Hastings, and it's called The Phantom Stagecoach. Number 23 High Street is a grand and imposing house. Today it is a private residence surrounded by small shops and houses, but the area behind the house was once a coaching station. A thrice weekly stagecoach from Hastings to London was introduced in 1794. The coach left at 5 a.m. and arrived at Tunbridge Wells at 12 p.m. before continuing its journey to London. Several coach stations cropped up around the old town, as well as the coaching inns. The coaching station at the back of number 23, the High Street, would have been very busy with coaches and horses and people and packages destined for important ports of Dover and Folkestone, the town of Tunbridge Wells, and of course the City of London. In November 1796, a coach was preparing to leave the old town of Hastings late one night. There were more important legal documents on board, and the coachman had strict instructions to go to a particular address in the city and not stop for anyone or anything. The coach was loaded up and ready to leave Hastings when the head coachman appeared and ordered his coachman not to set out. As there are very strange weather hanging around over the old town and also reported in the country surrounding Hastings, he was worried that his men would be lost in the mist. People rumoured the weather was not like anything they had ever seen before. However, the coachman, whose job it was to go to London, disobeyed his employer's orders and decided to head off despite the head coachman begging him to stay in the town, and set off at dawn when the weather had cleared. The head coachman did not know that his employee had even offered a hefty his employee was offered a hefty bonus if he got the documents to their destination in the given time. Despite all the warnings, the coach left Hastings bound for London. No one really knows what happened to the coachman, but he was never seen again. Some think that he was set upon by highwaymen and brutally murdered, and the coach and horses stolen. Others think that his mysterious disappearance was caused by that strange thick mist that was lingering over the town that night, and suggest that he was dragged away by the demons in the mist. The coachman's disappearance will always remain a mystery. Often on a cold winter's night, the residents of the High Street will hear horses' hooves galloping up the street. However, when they look out of the window, there are no horses to be seen, only a strange lingering mist. This is said to be the spirit of the coach that disappeared all those years ago. It is still trying to find its way back home, but remains forever lost in the mist. The next story takes us to Pevensey in East Sussex at a place called the Mint House, with this gruesome story, very suitable for Halloween. I hope you enjoy it. Maybe you want to get a stiff drink for this one. Jealousy can be a terrible thing. The green-eyed monster led to monstrous deeds in Pevensey which would probably never have come to light if it had not been for a deathbed confession, though the ghosts of one of the victims did return to try and reveal all. The seashore is now a good mile away from Pevensey, but before their retreat the waves once lapped at the village, making it an important strategic and commercial centre. Evidence of the former greatness lies in the coins which have survived from the days when it had its own mint. The much restored mint house stands in the single street of cobble and flint, along with the courthouse, reputed to be the smallest town hall in England in the days when Pevensey had its own mayor and corporation. The mint house had long ceased to produce coins by the year 1586, when it was rented by a London merchant named Thomas Dite. His object in renting the house from its owner, who was abroad, was largely based on lust. He needed somewhere to house and discreetly meet his mistress, Eleanor Fitzjohn, a particularly attractive young girl many years his junior. Eleanor perhaps grew to thinking she was rather wasting herself when she was left alone, as frequently happened when the merchant was busy with his affairs in faraway London. She became bored and unhappy, but the devil soon found work, or rather play, for her idle hours, and she took up with a young fisherman, handsome and unattached. We do not know how long this secondary affair had lasted. There is one view that it had only just begun, but luck was not on the side of the young lovers. Late one evening, Thomas Dite arrived unexpectedly at the mint house with a retinue of manservants in tow, to find his mistress in bed with the stranger. His jealousy, his rage knew no bounds, but the punishment he devised was coolly and calmly planned, and just as coolly carried out. In all that he did now, and for the rest of the night, as the torches threw great shapes on the walls in eerie distortation of hideous events in the mint house, Dite was aided by his unspecified number of henchmen. They were slavishly loyal, performing without question the orders they received, and he was rich, and they knew best how to serve their own interests. As the merchant ranted in the bedchamber and the young couple cowered back, naked beneath the blankets, Eleanor tried desperately to turn aside his wrath. She must have been familiar with his anger and perhaps the threats of what he would do if she were ever unfaithful. She tried wrapping something around herself and leaving her lover's side to placate Dite, whispering blandishments in his ear as he stood thunderous in the middle of the room. He remained completely immune and lashed out with the back of his hand, sending her flying into a corner. She scrambled to her feet and tried pleading. Dite's response was to have her securely bound by the servants, and as the horrified young fisherman struggled against the restraining arms to come to her aid, Eleanor's tongue was cut out. She was carried into what had once been the minting chamber, where of necessity the walls of solid stone and a great chimney stood in one corner, which had once carried the poisonous fumes from molten metal out into the open air. Various items from the days of manufacturing coins still remained in the room, including chain which were affixed to the ceiling. Dite, who by now seems to have calmed down and become calculating, noticed them and had the fisherman dragged in, gagged so he would not cry out, and tied by each limb by the chains. He hung face down, suspended from the chains, still naked, spread-eagled in mid-air, like a parody of a bird in flight. There was no shortage of wood in the house, and a large fire was built beneath him on the stone floor. It was the merchant who almost casually applied a torch to the faggots. Eleanor was dragged to within 5 feet of the flames as they began to take hold, and forced to watch as her young lover was roasted alive. The unfortunate man struggled and writhed for some time, and it is impossible not to believe that his torturers enjoyed the spectacle. Flames would have at least put a limit on his suffering, but it seems the wood was damp. The fire was slow and smoky, so bad, in fact, that Dite and his companions had at length to leave the room. Perhaps it was the smoke that finally killed the fisherman. He was cut down and his body taken in the dead of night along the dark, single street, then thrown out over the parapet of the village bridge for the tide to carry out to sea. And the probability was that questions would never be asked about the disappearance. Fishing was a precarious profession. Men were always going missing. Eleanor was carried to one of the upper rooms, where she was still literally left to die. There was no chance of escape, and she was still tied up, though she would hardly be in a fit state to even think of attempting it. She must have been fainting from loss of blood and shock. She had no food or water, and the door was locked upon her, with the shutters closing her into the darkness and despair. Perhaps she died quickly, perhaps it took many days. We shall never know. Dite returned to the house after an unspecified length of time, and her body buried in the land immediately behind the mint house. The merchant got away with his murders. The good people of Pevensey would have looked down on a shameless hussy like Eleanor, and if anyone even bothered to notice that she was no longer around, they would simply have assumed the Jezebel had been removed to another house of pleasure. They were to find out the truth some 15 years later. In the year 1601, Thomas Dite was on his deathbed, and fearing to meet his Maker with a crime of such magnitude on his conscience, confessed the deeds to his friends and a priest. How much he had to pay his servants for their silence over the years we do not know. Perhaps they were simple men whom he could threaten with a similar fate if they spoke of what had happened. Though he did not know, it was from beyond the grave that he faced the greatest risk of events being revealed. The ghost of his young mistress used to be seen on occasions in the mint house. She was silent, but she seemed to be trying so hard to say something. So we go from Hastings, a beach port, over to Hampton, or was once known as Hampton, which is now called Littlehampton, one of King Henry VIII's naval ports. It was known as Hampton originally, but they used to get confused apparently at sea between Hampton and Southampton, so they introduced the two-word name for it called Littlehampton, and then in the end, over time, Little and Hampton merged to be known as Littlehampton. And this particular story is from a very highly active paranormal premises called the Dolphin Pub, and it's quite a story. And if you want to sit back and listen to this, I'm sure you'll all be intrigued. It's called Spooky Goings On at the Dolphin. The delightful Dolphin has a fascinating history, a welcoming and friendly atmosphere, a well-stocked bar and delicious food, but it also appears to be a portal where numerous ghosts come and go at will. It has been subject to many paranormal investigations, including one by the highly acclaimed Living TV's Derek Acora and Colin Fry, who said in their film Visit that the building had many spirits. The original site dates back to 1735, when it was a coaching inn with large stables and 3 workers' cottages in the grounds. The building then became an old world convenience store, serving the people of the town with their needs, and as a local shop was the hub of any community. Perhaps this is why so many spirits congregate on the site. It might just be wise to add, I'm not punning any jokes about spirits behind the bar, by the way. Okay. Thank you for that. The present Dolphin came about a few years later when two brothers who owned the original Dolphin public house just across the road had a bitter quarrel, and one moved into the convenience store and turned it into a pub and called it the Dolphin. Finally, after years of arguing, one of the brothers backed down, and the Dolphin we see today kept its name whilst the other pub became the Swan. On Friday, 10th of March 2010, Worthing and District Paranormal Society, the WDPS, named the building the most haunted in West Sussex. Ellie, who is incredibly enthusiastic about her home and its family of spirits, said there were many instances to relate. For example, a man into the pub with a parrot on his shoulder, and Ellie told him no pets were allowed in the pub. He replied, "Well, you have a little black and white dog in here." Several people had noticed the little dog that runs around the bar and then seems to disappear near the pool table. Research has revealed that when Lord Byron visited the pub in 1806, he brought with him his beloved black and white dog, Boatswain. But 2 years later it died of rabies when only 5 years old. Is this Lord Byron's dog? Ellie then went on to tell me about room 2. A couple had booked in for a week's holiday and had paid in advance. The couple were seen to their room, and shortly afterwards the man appeared in the bar wearing only a towel. Ellie told him if he wanted a drink, she would bring it to his room, but he couldn't stay in the bar in a state of undress. Apparently he was preparing for bed when an apparition of a woman with no bottom half came through the door and floated over through the window. The following morning the couple had departed, with the CCTV showing them leaving at 4:30 a.m. Ellie had no idea where they would have gone to at that early hour. When Ellie telephoned to say she would return their money, the couple would not answer the phone. Katie, who was once very sceptical, recalls the experience when she went to clean room 4. And a shadowy figure of a man passed straight through her. The room has a very strange presence, and Ellie recalls the day a priest booked in and was given the room. Moments later he came downstairs requesting to be moved to another room immediately. Research revealed that a man had been resident in the room, had died of a heart attack, but why would he haunt the room is unclear. The most eerie room in the building is room 7, which used to be the children's nursery in its original building. Ellie said she would tell no more until I visited the room with Katie, as she herself didn't like going in the room. I approached the room with an open mind, and I was utterly amazed to first experience the rapid change in temperature. There was an icy breeze slicing through the room, and I could feel it swirling around my ankles, and there was certainly a strange atmosphere. As Katie and I talked, we heard footsteps and a loud knocking on the walls. I also heard what sounded to me like a wooden ball being dropped on the floor, which then proceeded to bump along the floor, making sounds similar to those heard when a game of skittles are being played. Could this have been a wooden child's toy of some kind? I looked around and saw what I could only describe as a white smoky mist in the left-hand corner of the room, rising and gathering into a ball, and then suddenly it was gone. When I told Katie, she said she had also experienced orbs in the room with green lights flashing downstairs. Ellie told me that a young girl, who said her name was Little Dolly, had appeared in this room, and in the nursery was a cupboard, and one day they decided to open it and had to prise the door as it had not been opened for many years. Inside they found a broken photographic image of a female child and the whole image of a male child. Ellie pieced together the image of the child and put it away, wondering who it might be. Much later, Debbie Dean, a medium and spiritualist artist, visited the pub to draw what she saw. In room 7, in total darkness, she drew a picture of a little girl who, unprompted, she said her child name was Dolly, who had died of diphtheria in that room. Ellie then compared the photographic image that she found with Debbie's drawing and was amazed to see a striking resemblance. Debbie could also see the word mummy or memory in front of the child. One day a man came into the Dolphin and asked if he could have a look around, as his grandfather had lived there with his wife and 14 children. He said one of the children, named Little Dolly, had died of diphtheria. Ellie told him what she had discovered, and later the man took her to Littlehampton Cemetery to show her the grave of Little Dolly, her name clearly visible on the tomb. Apparently the building is full of spirited, lively children, whom Ellie says can be quite mischievous at times, opening and closing doors or running along the corridors on the 3rd floor. I was then taken on a tour of the cellar. Although the cellars are always cold, there was a distinct icy breeze blowing through the room, as well as a haunting eeriness. Ellie explained that the spirit of an old blacksmith, Frederick, resides in the cellars, which at one time used to be the stables. When Debbie Dean visited, she sat in the cellar in darkness. The sound of gunshot heard in the cellars and a strong smell of sulphur. There is a dividing wall that was added at some time, and Ellie told me that on this occasion there had been a horrible smell, like rotten flesh, coming from behind it. Mediums have staked their reputation on the fact that there is a dead body behind the wall. The Dolphin, like other parts of Littlehampton, has a bricked-up tunnel in the cellar that is believed to be linked to the days of smuggling along the river. Local legends informs us that one time the tunnels collapsed and someone was crushed to death, so they were bricked up permanently. This could explain why there is so much activity in a small area from the corner of the High Street and along Surrey Street. When we walked to the area where the tunnel had been, Ellie asked the spirits to let us know they were there. Suddenly I felt something hit the lower part of my leg, like someone stabbing me or flickering a finger at me. It didn't hurt, but the sting was real, and I wonder whether this was one of the children having some fun. Back upstairs in the warmth of the bar, Ellie told me that one medium who visited the ladies' toilets came back and said she had seen someone rolling out pastry in the toilet. Investigation reveals that the kitchen was once located in this area and that a worker, Jane, had been murdered by her uncle William. Recently, Ellie and Katie said they had 20p coins falling from the ceiling, and on one occasion a handful was thrown across the room, and a female customer was hit on the chest, the impact leaving a mark on her skin. The Dolphin also has an extensive collection of Elvis Presley, Titanic, First and Second World War memorabilia. Ellie said that she has seen the spirit of an airman standing near the display. So is he recalling his contribution to the war? A customer sitting at the bar recalled the time when there was a celebration in the bar and packets of mini chocolate eggs were handed out to customers. He said a pile of eggs were on the bar in front of him, and when he suddenly felt something hit him on the back of the chair, He found one of the eggs on the floor behind the chair, although no one had touched them. Ellie has had some beautiful 1940s Christmas decorations, and they are normally kept in the cellar. On this occasion, several of the decorations appeared on the floor in the bar. Ellie explained that some of them are really delicate, and if they had been thrown, they would have been broken. There seemed to be no reason why they had appeared in the bar, and the only explanation is that spirit children joined in the celebration fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed those stories from Sussex and you're not too frightened to go to bed this evening. Let me know what you thought in the comments. I'll put the authors and the book titles in the description if you fancy getting your own copies. And please, if you liked what you watched or heard this evening, then please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, a like or a dislike if you so wish, and I'd much appreciate you helping me getting local history out there across the internet. Thanks very much. Now take care and don't have nightmares.